A far-right group doesn't want your children learning about actual history. So, and they have tried and thankfully failed to get certain books and certain lessons thrown out. So far. So now, the Tennessee Department of Education has refused to investigate claims by a group called Moms for Liberty that a second grade curriculum, which includes books about Black civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is anti-American and anti-white. Here we go. The Williamson County, Tennessee chapter of the group Moms for Liberty filed an 11-page complaint with the state, claiming that the classroom books and teacher manuals reveal both explicit and implicit anti-American, anti-white, and anti-Mexican teaching, according to the Tennessean. Now, the complaint, signed by local chairperson Robin Steinman, who Reuters has called an Air Force veteran and white mother of three, claims the Williamson County School District is violating the law banning critical race theory. So Tennessee is one of those states that said, critical race theory? Not in our schools. No, we can't have kids learning about that. Well, first of all, it's a college level course, so the kids aren't going to learn about that. Never was in the schools, never was in K through 12. And, it's a graduate level course that does examine some pretty important subjects when it comes to systemic racism. And so, and it also, kind of looks into the impact of that systemic racism on current minority groups. But the moms say that, no, this is critical race theory, learning about civil rights and Martin Luther King Jr. And in fact, here's a quote: "The relentless nature of how these divisive stories are taught, the lack of historical context and difference in perspective, and the manipulation pedagogy all work together to amplify and sow feelings of resentment, shame of one's skin color, and or fear." They talk about perspective. What other perspective is there when it comes to civil rights? There's pro-civil rights, and then there's the anti-civil rights. You want the racist perspective? Well, on the one side of this, there were people fighting for access to things like drinking fountains and bathrooms and good jobs and just, being treated as no longer a second-class citizen or a third-class citizen, but actually equal, according to the law. And of course, on the other side, they're the ones who think black people are genetically inferior. Both sides. So they're even. Like, that's what they want. That's what these groups want. They don't want you learning about this stuff. They don't want you, they want you to see the perspective of the racists. It's insane. And as far as, wanting to see that perspective, no, I don't want to see that perspective. Now, I want to show you more of this complaint. So here's some images of that. All right. Let me see if I have the right one. I submit, this is from the complaint, that Williamson County Schools is in violation of the state law with the teaching of great minds, BBC, wit and wisdom, English language arts, curriculum grade 2, module 3, civil rights heroes, which includes the following anchor texts: Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington, Ruby Bridges Goes to School, My True Story by Ruby Bridges, The Story of Ruby Bridges, The Separate is Never Equal, and she added that the classroom, books, and teacher manuals reveal both explicit, implicit, anti-American, anti-white, anti-Mexican teaching. Additionally, it applies to second grade children that people of color continue to be oppressed by angry, vicious, scary, mean, loud, violent, rude, and hateful white population, and teaches that the racial injustice of the 1960s is today. Well, okay. So, now, there is an oppressive, vicious, scary, mean, loud, violent, rude, and hateful group of white people out there. It's true, they do exist. Are they the majority of America? No. But they do exist, of course. And I think groups like that always end up existing. And some of them are in positions of power, and great influence, although most of them you'll just find on Fox News. But as I said, the majority of the country is not racist. Yes, there are issues with implicit bias, racial stereotyping, etc. But what critical race theory looks at is institutions. And there are institutions that exist today that are still racist. I mean, you look at the carceral system, you look at policing, you look at current zoning laws, you look at the way that the census is actually, because the census was just done. And, well, the census allows you to draw congressional lines. So what's happening right now? Republicans are drawing, and by the way, Democrats gerrymander as well, but Republicans do this in a way where, again, it also benefits certain Democrats in certain districts. They will draw lines to include as many black people in one geographic area, in one district. And sometimes these districts will take crazy, crazy shapes. Now, that's good for the Democrat because, well, that's a strong district. I'll always be safe. I like safe districts, so nobody's going to challenge me on that. I can have this district full of all the black people. But the Republicans then get the districts that are not filled with black people, that are filled with white voters. And a lot of these white voters might generally vote more Republican. And so that's one of those systems that is racist. So yes, as one of you puts, political segregation. Thank you, the Dark Canuck. That's an excellent phrase to put it, political segregation. And then, of course, there's other things. For example, you have, racism when it comes to bank loans, for example. If you're someone from the African American community, it's actually more difficult for you to get a home loan. And even it used to be even more difficult because they wouldn't lend out to people in certain areas. They literally called it redlining. And so there is, again, other things that are affected by race. Black people end up actually having the largest share of student loan debt. So they end up owing more on average than other demographics. Why is that? Well, they end up having to borrow more and they get further into debt. You also have groups that have fewer assets, like homes and businesses. You have poorer schools, higher crime neighborhoods, policing, incarceration. And again, all of that really goes down and back to the fact that when the day the first slave ship landed on our shores, there was not an even playing field in this country. I'm not saying other groups haven't had it bad. Look at indigenous people. Holy crap. You also had groups like the Chinese that were, discriminated against. You had the Irish discriminated against. You had a lot of groups that were discriminated against. But nobody has had to deal with, other than African Americans, chattel slavery and the impact that has had on the community and the descendants of those slaves. Again, there's a difference here. I know a lot of conservatives like to create a false equivalence between, for example, indentured servitude, which was, you had European immigrants that would come over and they would be sponsored, right? Basically, you'd have somebody who's wealthy pay their way. But when they got here, they had to work for 5, 10, however many years to pay back that debt. That's indentured servitude, and they'd have to do it for free. So now, again, that is different because they weren't dehumanized the way that black people under chattel slavery were. Again, for their entire life, enslaved, no chance for freedom, no buying your way out of freedom, no paying off your debt. Just, you are my property forever, and I will do whatever I want with you. I can chain you, I can whip you, I can rape you, I can kill you, and I won't see any repercussions for that at all. And if you try to escape, you will be caught by the police and brought back because you are nothing but property. That's how they felt about black people. And so that entire legacy has had a profound impact on this community. And so these things are not the same. The vestiges, by the way, of this system of turning people into property still exists to this very day. But no. Steinman is going to go further. She's actually going to suggest that slavery and Jim Crow were positive achievements like unity and the overall improvement of our country. Wow. So, look, this country, it's a sad part of our history, but this country was literally built off the backs of slave labor. There was an entire economic system that was built around this in the South, especially. But by the way, up until a certain point, slavery existed everywhere in the United States. And so it was just primarily utilized as an economic model in the agrarian South for the plantations and the fields. That economic system required exploited, enslaved labor. And in order to get those slaves, they had to be dehumanized and turned into literal property. So now afterwards, after abolition, after the Civil War, after the slaves were freed, you had Jim Crow, which is essentially ex-slave owners getting mad, being very, very mad that their property was no longer theirs, all right? And they were mad, so they set up a system where, you had so many different roadblocks put in their way. And of course, you add in the Klan, that's entire purpose was to go scare black people so that they wouldn't exercise their political, their newfound political power, what limited it was. And they set up all these rules and these laws and these systems in order to spite the people that used to be their property. It is a terrible history. These are terrible things. Where's the unity here? Where's the unity? You can't create unity. You can't solve these problems by ignoring the past. And again, all of that trickles down to today with the lack of, for example, wealth building in the black community. Plus the fact that, of course, this has led to things like Tulsa, the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street being burnt down by groups of angry racists. And so you have all of that. But again, people like these moms don't care. They don't want you learning the past. They don't want anybody learning the past. They want the past to just be forgotten. And for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. What if they're embarrassed or they just try to continue the perpetuation of these systems in some form or another? I don't know. I don't really care. All I know is that it's wrong. And it's disgusting. Now, there's more to this complaint, by the way. I'm not done. Okay. So let's bring up here image 2. So here's this. This is some of the stuff that was in these lessons that they objected to. Okay. They didn't object to this happening. These are real things that actually happen, but they object to actually showing and teaching this. So, for example, they say pages 22 to 23 show photographs of white firemen blasting black children to the point of bruising their bodies and ripping their clothes. Pages 18 to 19 show photographs of white and colored drinking fountains asking, which of these fountains looks nicer to you? Okay. Go to the next one here. The children who marched, sang, and prayed under blasting fire hoses were acting nonviolently. They showed the world the power of peaceful protest. Nonviolence wasn't an easy idea, especially for Southern blacks. They met hated every day, including from the all-white police force, expected unfair arrests, beatings, and worse from police. So right there, it shows how police were complicit in the system, and also showed how, and this counters a lot of the narratives that you hear from the right about black people and protests. For example, Ferguson, Kenosha, all these different places where, oh my God, rioters and looters. They're all rioters and looters. Well, here you have, and by the way, they said the same thing about Martin Luther King Jr., that, oh, they're just rioters and looters, civil rights protesters, rioters and looters. Terrible. They're terrible people. And then they also call out, of course, To the black community, one man stood for hate more than any other person in Birmingham, Eugene Bull Connor, Commissioner of Public Safety, spent that he had led the police and fire departments. Connor used his job to maintain segregation and bully black people. Lesson 30 teaches Different Voices by Anna Gratz Cockerville, detailing Lucille's point of view of firemen with hoses and water exploding, kids falling down, photographer's point of view of water hitting the kids in the back and water hurting the kids. Again, going back to what they talked about perspectives, what other perspective is there? Of the firemen? Book 2, Ruby Bridges Goes to School. Ages 2 to 3 depict photographs of the neighborhood sign that says, "We want white tenants in our white community." And Smiling, a white boy holding a sign that says, "We won't go to school with Negroes." Ages 14 to 15. There's a group of white people holding up signs that we want segregation and we don't want to integrate. All of this literally happened. Pages 24 to 25 shows a Norman Rockwell, it's supposed to be Norman Rockwell painting. Problem we all live with, depicting Ruby Bridges walking to school, the N-word in the background. And look, it's a right-wing complaint, so of course you're going to have spelling errors and all sorts of grammatical problems. Finally, one more here. Here's what they're saying about it. Saying that some children are seeing counselors to overcome the emotional trauma inflicted upon them by what they learned in Tennessee public education. It must stop. History must be taught through an objective lens and complex subjects presented in an age where they can be analyzed and understood in appropriate historical contexts. You know, at an age where we have already drilled in our super racist beliefs into them and where, you know, facts and logic can no longer get to them. Targeting elementary age children with daily lessons on fighting past injustices as if they are occurring in present day violates Tennessee law and will sow the seeds of racial strife, neo-racism. How? Neo-segregation. Oh my God. Why? What the hell? I love how by the way, this is not substantiated. Okay. But they're saying kids are seeing counselors because of the trauma of learning things that actually had happened in the past. Oh no. And their conclusion is, so let's just not teach them ever. So here's the irony about all of this. I'm a millennial, all right? My generation is constantly being called weak, snowflakes, sensitive. Oh, you're so sensitive, you snowflake millennials. Oh, you got the participation trophies, so your little fifis didn't get hurt. Never mind the fact that we didn't want the trophies. We didn't come up with that idea. You came up with that idea. You gave us the trophies. And we were just like, okay, I don't want to hurt your feelings. You know, you're going to give me a trophy for nothing. All right, well, fine. If I don't take it, then that's mean. I'm not going to do that. All right, fine, whatever. But now that same generation that complains about millennials, they're now saying, oh my God, will you just think of the trauma that's happening to kids for learning actual history? And now they're also saying, because of that trauma, we're going to ban this from school. We're going to ban it. We're going to ban it. Ban education. Ban these books. Ban MLK Jr. Ban Ruby Bridges. That's what they want. I don't know. To me, it kind of feels like they're the ones who have some pretty hurt feelings. They're feeling some things. All right? They're real hurt, real triggered by the existence of facts. Weird. And by the way, it's the same people who flipped out about Dr. Seuss. Now, Dr. Seuss, oh my God, I can't believe they canceled Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss, the family that owns the publishing, pulled that book because not only was it old and had some questionable material in it, but also because it didn't sell very well. But the same people who flip out on cancel culture are canceling MLK Jr. and Ruby Bridges and education. There is so much irony. There is so much projection. There is so much censorship, all wrapped up in this critical race theory discourse. And they don't see it. They just don't see it. Insanity. Just complete and utter nuttery. So many snowflakes here. And it ain't the kids. The kids are fine. The kids are going to be all right. It's the parents that are, well, that are the actual snowflakes. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.